the Seersucker Knit Stitch Pattern. Hi, I'm Kristen and welcome back to my channel, Studio Knit. Today's Seersucker Stitch creates textured rows of these puckered diamond shapes edged with stockinette ridges. If you're excited to knit up the Seersucker Stitch, please like up this video. It really helps me out. We'll be knitting these 8 rows together shortly, but I also want to let you know the written pattern is available for free over on my website, as well as in my new Knit Stitch pattern book. There's a printed version, there's also a digital PDF, and the Seersucker Stitch is found on pages 41 and 42. We are knitting the flat version today. I also have instructions for knitting it in the round. And you'll see this little symbol right here. It means that it's not a reversible pattern. So the front, the right side of our work shows the seersucker design, and then if we flip it to the back, which is called the wrong side of our work, you'll see that it looks different. It's still really pretty, but it's not identical. So that means it's not a reversible design. I also have the chart written out for you. So if you're new to charts, this is a great way to familiarize yourself with those symbols and how simple knitting charts work. And for your materials, you can use any yarn of your choice with appropriately sized knitting needles. Of course, you also want to have a little bit of scissors on hand and a tapestry needle. So let's knit it up. To begin, we are casting on in multiples of 4 plus 1. So that means we cast on 4 stitches, and then you continue casting on in multiples of 4 until you have as many stitches as you would like on your needle, and then at the end it's just one last little stitch right there on the end, and you'll see how we use him or her throughout the pattern. So we're beginning row 1 here with knit 2, P1, knit 1, in between those little asterisks, those little stars. And that means that we're repeating this pattern of 4 stitches. So right here is the P1, and then we're finishing this repeat with knit 1. And we are going to continue knitting these 4 stitches until we get to the end of our row. So let's finish it up here, 2 knit stitches, and then we bring our yarn to the front to do that purl stitch, and then we have the 1 knit stitch at the end of our repeat right there between the asterisks. And you'll see after the asterisks there's just 1 K1 that is a knit 1, and so this little stitch right here gets knitted at the very end of row 1. All right, pretty simple. So let's start with row 2. We're beginning with purl 1, and we have our yarn in the front. We're purling 1 stitch, and now we're beginning a repeat of those 4 stitches between the asterisks. So that is a P1, and then we bring our yarn to the back for knitting 1, bringing our yarn, to the front. Let's scooch our stitches, and we'll do 2 purl stitches right here. And we repeat those 4 stitches to the end of the row. Now row 3, this is knit 1 and purl 1. Again, it's between the asterisks, so that means we are repeating knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, all the way down until we get to the very end of row 3. If you've done the seed stitch before or the 1 by 1 rib stitch, this is very familiar to you. And you get all the way to the end of row 3, and the last stitch you have is simply knitting 1 stitch. Okay, so now row 4. 4, we're beginning with purl 1. So our yarn is in the front. We purl that 1 stitch, and then we just finish our row with the K1, P1, all the way down the row. If knitting is new to you, these K1, P1s will definitely give you a lot of knit and purl experience. Okay, row 5. We begin with purl 1, so our yarn is in the front. We're purling 1 stitch. And between the asterisks, we have 4 stitches, and it's purl 1 and then knit 3. So we are knitting these 3 stitches right here. And we continue this pattern of P1, K3, purl 1, knit 3, all the way down the row. And then there's that one little stitch of ours that we are familiar with. And we just purl that last stitch, P1, at the very end. Row 6, we begin with that 1 stitch, knit 1, and then we carry on all the way down the row with the stitch repeat between the asterisks. So this time it's P3, K1. So we are purling 3 stitches right here. 1, 2, I'm getting a little bit off camera and a little bit out of focus, but you totally understand this pattern by now. So we did the P3, K1 all the way down the row, and we just continue until you're at the end of row 6, and it's time for row 7. Now, row 7 is exactly like row 3. So it is K1, P1, K1, P1, all the way down the row until we get to that one last little stitch. And you can see right there in the pattern, the last stitch is going to be a K1. It is knitting 1 stitch, this guy right here, finishing that up. And this is an 8-row repeat. So that means we are at our very last row. And you start with P1 between the asterisks, then it's just K1, P1, all the way down to the very end of row 8. And continue repeating these 8 rows until your piece is the length that you desire. I think it would make a great scarf or a blanket. You can get really creative. And I like to finish up my repeats with just the last 2 rows of row 1 and row 2. You'll see that in the pattern, the written pattern instructions. I mentioned that as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time, guys. Bye.